I have to say, got it. Welcome back, everyone. It's nice to see you. And happy Valentine's Day for anyone who this is special for them. Today, it's our last time as a group, Leah and my time. And so we really, again, want to have it be specifically focused on the things that you're wanting to bring to your skills and back to your market. And so we'll do the best we can with that today. And hearing from some of the feedback about what would be useful, we tried to incorporate that in today's agenda. So it's going to be highly interactive, hopefully. A little tiny bit of lecturette, but very little, mostly an opportunity to talk with each other, but also specifically with your market partner. And some of the things that we want to cover that people were interested in was talking a little bit more about power or power dynamics. So a little bit about role responsibility. We'll examine different roles, and some of you hold multiple roles. So how do you navigate some of the aspects of using your role power responsibly, and building some empathy for yourself and for the other people that you're in market with. Also looking a bit at how you make decisions together. So some skills on and practice on group processes, how to lead a meeting, ways to work. They're sort of really fundamental facilitation skills that you could bring to, for two people, or if you're running meetings. So some considerations around that. And then have some time to really dig into if there are some markets who are currently in, at an impasse or in a really challenging spot in their market. And also for those that might be wanting to prepare or anticipate things that could be coming up. So have some time to talk together and leave with some resources and next steps. And we're not going away. So how we can be accessed also and support you. Anything to add, Leah, with that?
It took me a minute to unmute there. Sorry. No, no, that was perfect, Karen. Thank you.
Okay. How about Jimmy and Andrew? Any?
I guess I'll just say, yeah, you all filled out some interim feedback. So this session today is in response to that. And I think there's a hunger for a lot of y'all to keep talking about the conflicts you're going through. And I know just hearing from each other is super valuable. So we're prioritizing that today. We're making time at the end of the session for it as well. And we also could have a standing monthly ongoing thing. That's just something that my organization and Andrew's organization jointly hold for like airing of the grievances, Festivus, or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, just calling that out as well. But yeah, that's all I have to say.
Okay.
And for Vermont folks, we will be having a workshop on this topic at our Farmers Market Conference on Monday, March 18th. So I hope that you are able to join us in person that day. And I am hopeful that you might be willing to share a little bit about your experience in this cohort during that session.
I'll be there.
And you can meet Jimmy in the flesh.
Yeah. You'll see how tall I am. It's crazy.
He's very tall.
Well,
Oh my goodness. All right. So I'm wondering, I think Jimmy, as far as one of the things we're going to kind of do an activity into the area of power, but to first talk about it, Jimmy, were you going to kind of touch on the power dynamics at farmers markets? It's a resource you've already taken a look at, but we wanted to just introduce it again.
Yeah, so our next topic that we're diving into is the breakout room you're about to enter is all on around like embracing these different roles that we find to be pretty common. Sherry's commenting that I am really tall, I think, in the chat. Sorry, that was distracting. So we're about to go we're about to go into breakout rooms and assume different roles, and there will be some prompts around, just unpacking what it's like to be in that position. And this stems from a lot of you reporting that, like, when it comes to the conflicts you're working on, you're feeling stuck, or you're working with a situation that seems impassable, or a person that seems impassable, right? So we're hoping that the breakout room role play scenario is just a little bit helpful in building awareness around that. And yeah, this conflict power dynamics document really is just highlighting common dynamics that underlie a lot of this. And I guess just to draw a few examples, I know that Sanford Farmers Market this year had an issue with a church person from a church setting up in the market footprint and proselytizing. And, some of the imbalances that I would identify from that was there was sexism involved, of this being a man, and I think posturing and using body language and verbal language that I think was intimidating, that he probably would not have done had it been a man confronting him. I'm sure many of you can relate to that. There was also culture, right? Like the value, this person thought he had a First Amendment right to be in the public park, had no understanding of market culture and how market structures worked. He was operating in a place where there wasn't a structure. He had a First Amendment right to be setting up in a park. And also for the culture, like, he also thought it was appropriate to tell people that they're likely going to hell unless they embrace his views. So just calling out some of those imbalances there. We just had a conflict session at our main farmers market conference, and somebody from last year's session cohort that you all are part of now it was a vendor to vendor conflict, and there was a huge power dynamic with one of the vendors being a founder of the market in his 70s. There was a social status that accompanied that. There was also social status, like social media status. This guy took his issue to Facebook multiple times, airing his grievance in very inappropriate ways that were damaging to the market and the vendor. And there was, again, this was a 75-year-old man and a 30-year-old woman. So there was definitely some sexism and just disrespect there. But anyways, yeah, just calling, maybe this is a document you'll never look at again, but hopefully it's just enlightening and just unpacking and understanding what's going on a bit more. And I think this role play, standing in the shoes of that church person, as frustrated as we might be with him from our perspective, or this older vendor who, it's definitely a complicated and packed scenario there. Like, just standing in their shoes can help us to form that connection before correction, right? But like, just I think big takeaway when we're dealing with interpersonal conflicts is just having the other person be heard and validated. So yeah, there's just a lot more I could say there, but I'll turn it back over.
Yeah, thank you, Jimmy. And so, power has so many ways to define it. And some of the things you're talking about, that we have our personal power and we have status power. And oftentimes it gets talked about power over or power under, where people have a lot of, that under place, there's a lot of vulnerabilities. The way we're going to look at it for this exercise is really in role power. So in examining role power in either an up power, when you're holding up power, for example, as a board president, Or if you're in a down power role where it might be, you know, perhaps it's a vendor, or maybe for some of you, it could be as a market, in your market operator, you have aspects where you have a down power and an up power role. So, and there's different responsibilities with that. In an up power role, you know, one of the books that I work, or organizations I work with, is called Right Use of Power. And it's, we can share that resource at the end, but it's a really interesting method to help you kind of examine, when you're in an up power role, what are your responsibilities? And the concept is that you have 100%, 150% responsibility when you have an up power role. So understanding the vulnerabilities, understanding what you have decision making around, and understanding how misuses of that power can happen. And one of the things I find interesting with an up power role is that underusing that role power can really be a misuse. And I understand, so I've heard it, some complexities in your market operator role is like, well, some people really assume that I have this decision-making power when in fact you don't. But what it could be is that, so how do you work with the role power you have to be able to define your responsibilities to others that are making those assumptions? And when can you ask for the support you need? So just building awareness, this exercise is really to build awareness around the role power. And for the, just a couple of thoughts on recognizing where you have expertise, and recognizing, like, for some of you, you've been in all 4 of the roles that we're going to use. So again, it's to help sort of crystallize where are your responsibilities when. And I'm imagining it can get really blurred together and people can blur it for you. So how we're going to orchestrate this is there'll be one group that is market operator, one group that is board, a member or board president, one group is vendor, and one group is customer. So we're going to have 4 groups, and really you could choose any of them. We're going to ask that when you get into your breakout groups, that one person gets chosen to be a recorder, because we're going to report back together. And you have 3 primary questions that you'll talk with your group. So the first question is, what are the strengths? What is the strengths of your role, and what do you bring to the market? Your gifts, your strengths, your responsibilities, and your purpose. So talking about how wonderful you are in that role and how much it contributes. The second question is, what are people saying about you in the parking lot when they're complaining? You know, like if your role is taken to the extreme or the assumptions aren't made correctly, what might people be complaining about? So you make some guesses of what you think people complain about your role. It's not personal. The last question is really talking together about what you would need the other groups to understand. So what might it be helpful if you're a market operator? What would you want the board to understand about your role if they could support you in a different way? What would you want customers to understand, or vendors maybe to have a better understanding? So even just 1 or 2 things would be great. And we'll jump in, one of us will jump in the room with you for just in the beginning to make sure you understand if you have questions about it. So again, and it's up to you. We kind of want it balanced out a little bit. We want to make sure that somebody's in the customer category. So you could try on one of the roles that you really can't stand. I've always had complaints with this one, and then this could also build some perspective taking. So when you go into that role, you're going to have to think of what are the strengths that you bring to the market? What is it that you don't? What is it that they're complaining about you, and what might you need from others to understand? Any questions about that? I think Okay,
There was a question in the chat about whether these are things that we as an individual have, like what are my personal gifts and strengths when I'm in the role of a board member or when I'm in the role of the customer, or are
think
they strengths inherent in the role? Like
that's
what
a
are the strengths
great
and gifts that all
question.
customers have or that all vendors have?
I think it's what strengths does does the role bring? And it's going to be a little bit different for different people because you might bring some personal strengths into that particular role. And since you notice that it has a positive impact, why not that be part of your role? So yeah, I think focus on the role, but also, include your strengths. Because you probably didn't end up in that role for no reason. So other questions? Okay, so I think,
Another thing that I would just like to add about the power dynamics graphic is somebody very astutely pointed out in the chat, Sherry, I believe, that if you don't acknowledge the power that you do have, it can lead to confusions or deflections when leadership is needed, which is exactly what I was talking about in our planning yesterday when that arises. And I just want to put in a plug for engaging with professional mediators, because often the person who has lower power will be aware of the power dynamic or more aware of it. But if you engage with a mediator when you're having a difficult conversation, within your market, that person will help to level the playing field, so to speak, and just name the power dynamics and work within them to help everybody be on an equal footing in the conversation.
that's such a great point, and that if you have that up power role position, what the responsibilities are on you to be able to support that other role to be heard and to be able to speak. So, okay, thank you. Naming your power. Okay, and Andrew, are they going to self-select or how will that work?
It looks like it.
Self-select, please. Everybody should see the option to join a room and think about a role other than what you normally have at market, perhaps, or take the role that you have at market.
So if you scroll down, if you're looking at the breakout room box that just popped up, you scroll down and there's, options to join, and we'll meet you in there.
And we'll give you about 10 to 12 minutes to talk.
I don't have a breakout room box.
Yeah,
Where-
I don't. Oh, if you click on more, there's something called join a breakout room.
Oh, okay. Yep, thank
Thanks.
you.
Thanks for catching that.
And if you're having trouble with it, you can just say which one you'd like to go to, and we can put you in there.
Would anyone be willing to join a board member? Because we don't have anyone in the board category yet.
I'm gonna join that.
Thank you. Oh,
And
there was
actually,
a bunch.
And we need more managers and vendors.
Yeah, a few managers and vendors. There we go.
so Jimmy, just plug me in wherever you need at the end.
Let's put.
I
should we-
don't care.
We can put Gretchen in as a manager. How about that? Where are you? All right. I'm gonna jump into.
Gifts and the strength of the customers are really that they are what make the market run. We depend on their money. We depend on them being there. And that's really an important role. And they're kind of the circulatory system of the market. They keep us going. And we should always have a touch point to them. Some complaints or concerns people have around the customer as a role is that sometimes they don't respect our space as if it was a commercial space or a store. They are not really taking ownership over where their children might be or where their dogs might be, and in close proximity to products and how they can damage that. And then what we would like others to understand about the role is, and Jimmy actually brought this up kind of towards the end, is it takes a special type of person to show up and be a weekly customer. You're open for 3 hours a day, and so they have to have this commitment to want to show up. And at the same time, is there like a privilege and accessibility boundary, or is it also, are you making your market accessible to everybody and you have a large group of people who are maybe joining the market to spend their EBT? Like, what lenses are we putting on to really understand our customer role?
Nice. And was there any particular request that the customers had of a particular role, like what we need from the vendors or what we need from the board members? Do they even know board members exist? I don't know, just curious. That
Yeah,
came
it's
up.
and we didn't get a chance to talk about it, but just reflecting on my own market, I'm not sure how aware our customer base is of the structure of the market. They see me as the face, and and then going back to that, they think that I have a lot more power than I do, because they don't understand that it's a structured system.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay, how about another group? Board member, vendor?
Yeah, I can go next.
Thank you.
So strengths as board members, we talked about how if board members are not vendors, some of their strengths are being detached and maybe more objective from not being in the, the heat of the market. And also if they're not vendors, getting the community as board members, gets the community represented and invested in the market. But strengths as vendor-led boards, a lot of experience, understanding exactly what vendors need, so you can make decisions based on what's good for people. Complaints we talked about. If it's not a vendor-led board, maybe the board doesn't understand what the vendors need. They're too strict. We don't know why they made these rules. By vendor-led boards, they're stuck in the routine. They're doing the same thing that they've always done. There's no room. They're not open for change. Or also like self-centered decision-making, like what's good for me, not what's good for the market, or what's good for these certain vendors who are making the decision, not what's good for everybody. What we want people to understand, how important the market is to us, financially, emotionally, how we're invested in it. Also, there's no perfect solution. There's not a one-size-fit-all answer to a lot of problems. Not all rules are gonna work perfectly. What we want from people is as much input as possible in decision-making of what people need, what people expect, and also for people to step into roles and take on responsibility within the market. That's what we came up with.
Thank you. And really interesting differentiating for, vendor, board members with vendor experience and not. Thank you for clarifying, having some requests of the other groups. Nice. How about manager or vendor?
Yeah, I can do that. I was in the manager group.
Thank you.
We pretty much talked about what is the essential role of a manager, and there was a lot. You're bringing leadership to everything. You're trying to understand the bigger picture and keep that going and keeping things organized. And you're essentially the middleman and the head communicator of everything. So you kind of have to have like a thick skin and let things roll off your back like a duck would. One of our members in the group gave that analogy, and I thought it fit really well. And you have to be a good listener when you're in it. And what a lot of customers and sometimes vendors don't understand is we're there to listen, and we are trying to listen. And yeah, we're trying to solve the problems, but a lot of times, or sometimes, depending on the situation, they think we're not listening and that we're picking sides, that we're being biased, and no one really likes the rule enforcer, which is something the manager kind of has to do. And personally, in our market, we haven't had much complaint about like trashed areas or unkept spaces, but that is something that market managers are constantly aware of and trying to keep clean just so that that isn't an issue.
Mhm.
Yeah, we're not trying to pick sides, and we are human and we're not perfect. No one is, but we're here to listen. We're here to try and come up with the best outcome that we can for the markets.
Thank you for that. And it sounds like you had really group consensus on some of the really important roles that you hold as the manager, and wanting to be there to serve and listen. And I'm wondering if you had anything in particular that came up for a request from any of the other groups. I think you had some definitely around the customer. How about either board member or vendor? Or was it sort of all the same? Please understand our role and that we're doing, we're managing a lot and that we're really trying to be.
Yeah, I know that in my specific farmers market, we did have like one set of customers that didn't understand the structure a little bit, but then once they were told, they were like, oh, okay, thank you for explaining. It makes a lot more sense of how things are being run. So there was a little miscommunication in that part, but it was something that was resolved quickly.
Thank you. Thank you for that example. That's awesome. So, okay, last but not least would be, I think we got vendor. That's a smaller group.
Yeah, that was kind of funny because Georgie and I are both from the Burlington Farmers Market, and we were the only two in the group.
We'll analyze that later.
Yeah. So some of the strengths that we talked about for vendors were the institutional knowledge of just having been there for a long time, being customer facing and having that relationship with customers and also with other vendors, their investment in the market. And they are the backbone of the market. There wouldn't be a market without the vendors. And the diversity of the members, the vendors, they have different experiences, they're from different cultures, they have different knowledge, different history with the market, all those things. Some of the things that maybe people say outside of the market about the vendors is that, they don't follow the rules. Maybe they have long lines at their booth. Their prices are too high. People aren't finding what they want. There's not enough variety. Maybe there's a lack of options for payments. And then some of the things that that vendors wish that other people understand is how much it takes to actually be a vendor, how much preparation and work goes into being a vendor. A general understanding of what it means to be a small business, and understanding the realities of why prices are the way they are. That sometimes there have to be exceptions to the rules. That vendors are humans and sometimes they have human problems. Something might have happened before they came to the market that day or that week that is, causing trouble for them to be there. And then I'm not sure how this, and just being able to understand that there are, that there are clear clear rules and policies that the vendors have to follow.
Mhm.
I think that's everything we had, unless Georgie has anything to add.
She gives a thumbs up.
Okay.
That's really, really heartwarming, actually. You know, I know for me, I've just built empathy in all these categories, and somebody asked if we're harvesting this, and I tried to write notes, but I think as it's recorded, we can go back and get that written out. That would be a nice thing to share with everybody, what the responses have been. Very thoughtful. Thank you.
I think Mary Beth's comment was also like a quote that she hears often.
Yeah.
Let's see.
What we want the customers and what the vendors, complain about. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, I see another complaint. This is from today. This is fish fresh.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. I don't know, Leah, do we want to, I think it's a good transition now.
Wonderful. Well, let's see. So moving into the group process. So we did provide a little outline of some of the things that I think of as best practices in groups. And it feels like an abrupt shift. So I want to name, like, if this feels like whiplash, like, whoa, okay, now we're going somewhere else. You might want to just shake off the piece we just did. And yeah, so we were responding to, what's that, Karen?
Leah, do you think we ought to invite people if they just want to give feedback in general about that for a minute, or are you ready to shift?
Yeah, maybe we'll take a thumbs vote on if you're just good with shifting to the next thing, thumbs up. If you don't really have an opinion, thumb sideways. If you really want to take a little bit more time on the activity we just did, maybe to ask some questions or any of that, then thumbs down. So thumbs up is we're moving. Thumbs down is we're staying. Thumbs sideways, doesn't matter. All right, let's see. So
all right.
looks like we're moving on. Okay, very good. All right, so in response to many people's wonderings about how do we have group processes where we're sure that all the voices are getting heard, we have some clear way that we're making decisions, we have some kind of structure that supports meetings so they're satisfying. So this is an area of passion for me, and we shared an outline of the best practices that I like to work with in my process as a facilitator. So I thought that we could move through this guidelines, this not guidelines exactly, but this outline, that's the word I'm looking for, that I like to work with. And as we go, I'm really interested to kind of do more thumbs up and down voting about things as we go, as I get a sense of what your experiences are. So first I would ask, if you're a person who sometimes has to be involved in meetings within your market role, would you give me a thumbs up so I have a sense of how many of you ever have to be part of a meeting, whether you're leading it or not? So maybe about half the folks are into meetings. And I'm guessing that probably everybody on the call has been in a meeting at some point, even if it's not specific to the market. So sometimes when we think about going to a meeting, we can be kind of groaning like, oh man, meetings, more meetings. And sometimes it can feel like meetings are frustrating because it's there of a whole lot of reasons. And so I'm going to work with some things that I think make meetings feel productive, energizing, and useful. So I like to, if I'm in the role, let's check again. How many people ever have to lead a meeting? Just give me a thumbs up if you ever have to lead a meeting. So we've got a few people that sometimes have to lead a meeting. Great, thank you. And so when you begin to lead a meeting, I like to start with some kind of an opening. And for me, an opening to a meeting is for the purpose of letting the people gathered have a sense that we've formally started, and then to let people know what I perceive my role as if I'm the leader. So if I can let people know, here's how I come to be the one leading this meeting. It's because I'm the board chairman, so of course I'm leading the meeting, or it's because I've been designated, or we rotate facilitators and it's my turn, but some kind of naming of, there's a reason why I'm leading, here's what it is. And then if the meeting is with people that don't know each other, it can be useful to go around with introductions. Sometimes, a lot of times we're meeting with the same group over and over again. It's a standing meeting. And then we might not need to introduce ourselves, but some groups like to have like a little quick check-in. So these are options depending on what the type of meeting is and whether your group is an ongoing group meeting or whether it's a one time, or whether you're stepping into a group where you're not a known entity, you're from the outside and you're facilitating the meeting. Then more introduction is helpful. And then there's guidelines for engagement. It's good to say, here's how we're engaging with each other during this meeting. And some groups already have guidelines in place. So maybe this group already has a set of guidelines that you operate by, like we're going to speak one at a time. Nobody's going to speak a second time until everybody that wants to has spoken a first time. I'm just throwing out guidelines. And so sometimes there's already guidelines, and if there are, then it's good to review them at the beginning. You know, just a reminder, here are our guidelines, or you have them posted on the wall. Here are our guidelines. If there are no guidelines, then as a facilitator, I think it's really helpful to say, for today, in my role as facilitator, these are the guidelines that I'll be working with, that I'd like to invite you to go by for today. If a group is going to be meeting over time, then that group probably wants to together create guidelines so that they're owned together. If you're going to have a one-off meeting, then you probably don't want to spend most of that meeting developing your guidelines. If you're going to be meeting repeatedly, it's well worth your time to spend a whole meeting developing guidelines. So it depends. If there are no guidelines and we're not likely to be forming them today, then I, as the facilitator, will tell you, here are the guidelines I'd like to use today. So that's how I handle guidelines for engagement, because it really does make a difference what the situation is. Are we going to be meeting over a long term? Are we meeting just this once? Am I an outside facilitator, or am I part of you? And then so in the opening, I just like to name that, here's the guidelines, and then I like to move into just any logistics. Like we're scheduled to meet for 2 hours. We're going to take a break in the middle, whatever the logistics are. The bathrooms are over there. Whatever people need to kind of have their bodies settled. And then you move into the body of the meeting. And I think an agenda is really important. So I see a lot of conflicts come up where people come to a meeting not 100% sure what we're doing in this meeting. What are we talking about? Or people come urgent to make sure that the thing that's important to them is going to be covered. And that hasn't been decided in advance. So they come in with some angst about the urgency to get their voice in and get the thing that's important to them covered. So I like to suggest that agendas be determined in advance, and that there's an opportunity for people to weigh in about what they'd like to see go on the agenda. So some process for people to suggest agenda items in advance by a deadline that's prior to the meeting. So the facilitator can then see, okay, here's what people want on the agenda, so that the facilitator can organize that in advance. Trying to think about what order should we cover these in, or wow, there are 25 items on this agenda and we're only meeting for an hour. So how am I going to work with that situation? So having the agenda in advance, very helpful. Then moving into the group discussion, which you hold in accordance with whatever your guidelines are. And so that is, it's helpful to, as a facilitator, be a timekeeper. So you're paying attention to, we're moving into the discussion period now. There are probably going to be some decisions we need to make today. So let's track the time so that we end discussion in time to look at next steps and decisions. And then moving to the decision-making process. When I feel when I sense that we're moving into a possible decision, if there are already decision-making processes in place, we review them. Okay, so just a reminder, here's how we make decisions together. Maybe it's a majority vote. Maybe it's a consensus process. Maybe it's some hybrid. And so naming what the decision-making process is. Maybe it's Robert's rules. We're going to go with motions and seconds and like that. Whatever it is that your process is, if you already have a decision-making process, a quick review. It's astounding to me how often groups don't have a clear decision-making process. Well, we just kind of talk until we agree. Okay, so that's kind of a consensus decision-making process. So let's name it. And so naming what it is that our decision-making process is. If people are really conflicted and frustrated around decision-making, then as a facilitator, I might say, for today, since it's not 100% clear for you what your decision-making process is, for today, I'd like to suggest that we try this decision-making process. And I might, as a facilitator, suggest a process for deciding. Because you kind of have to have a decision-making process in order to decide what your decision-making process is. This has been really confusing sometimes when groups are in conflict, and maybe hiring me to facilitate a meeting, and there's no way to vote on how to vote. And so as a facilitator, I create a bridge there and say, okay, so for the purposes of this, for the purposes of deciding how we decide, here's how we'll decide. So sometimes a person in the leadership role makes that little bridge temporarily so that people can then decide the decision-making process and then use that. And super important that often gets lost, especially in consensus processes, is some formal way of saying, we have reached the decision and this is what it is, and we're going to write it down. And it's going to be kept as a record, so that a couple of days from now, we aren't shaking our head going, what did we actually decide? So writing it down, very important. And then I think it's really important to have an intentional closing. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but that everyone understands that when we say this, or when we do this, that's when it wraps. That's when it's done. We know we're finished. Because otherwise sometimes it turns into like a little bit of everybody's kind of in a chit-chatting place and the meeting just kind of falls apart and we go, oh, I guess it's done. So I think it's really useful to have a very clear formal ending that everybody is aware of. All right, so I'm gonna, yeah, go ahead, Karen.
I just wanted to say, Leah, too, that a couple of the skills that y'all practiced in earlier sessions, like reflection and summary, that in your role leading a meeting, it can be really useful to reflect after somebody speaks, or just give a summary of some of the things people are saying, without regard to saying what's agreed to or not. And because oftentimes in meetings, people feel like, did anyone hear me? You know, that sort of thing.
Yes, for sure. And some styles of facilitation do that very intentionally. After each person shares, there's a reflection to make sure they were understood accurately. Sometimes even each thing a person shares is being noted. And because it is true that many times people go to a meeting and walk away feeling like they don't know that they really were heard about their important point that they made. So just thumbs vote again. have you ever attended a meeting where you did not have a sense that what you shared was necessarily understood or heard? Has anybody had that experience? I know I have. Yeah. And also, have you ever had the experience in a meeting of coming into the meeting with a certain amount of trepidation or angst because you were sitting on something important and you didn't know if you would be heard? So some urgency and wondering whether you're really going to be heard. Anybody have that experience? I know I certainly have. So part of being a great meeting leader is to help bring some of that angst down by having clarity about these parts. And the opening can be so important in that way, because if I'm gonna facilitate, and say we're using my guidelines, I'm likely to let folks know that every single voice that wants to be heard, being heard accurately, is really important to me as facilitator. And this is how I take care of that. This is how I make sure that that occurs. And so then people can relax a little bit and know, I don't have to like get urgent and aggressive and find a way to push my point in there or say it 12 times, because this facilitator is going to do this particular process for making sure I'm understood. So usually it greatly decreases the chance that somebody repeats themselves. I think we've probably all been in a meeting where somebody keeps saying the same thing. They keep saying it over and over throughout the meeting. To me, that's a clear sign that they're not sure yet that they really got heard. So they are still trying. And so if I reflect, if my style isn't to reflect every single person's sharing, and yet I notice there's somebody who's said the same thing 3 times now, I will definitely reflect what that person is saying, because clearly they're not getting a sense that that's being really heard. And also it gives us a chance to check our assumptions, because sometimes somebody is urgently saying something, I reflect it, and they go, no, that's not it at all. And maybe I reflected it word for word, but what becomes clear is they haven't been able to express it in a way that we're getting them, and they sense that we're not getting what they really care about, what's really important. So a few follow-up questions, a few open-ended questions. Would you say more about this part? I wasn't sure I understood that. Can help that person get heard more fully. And then when they do get more fully, you see it in their body language. It's like, oh, they're so relieved that finally the important thing they want to be heard about, they're getting understood about. And nobody has agreed necessarily with what they're saying. That wasn't what they needed the most. They needed to be accurately heard. So, but they can come across as if they need you to agree with them because they're feeling so urgent about getting understood. So some of those mediator kind of skills and the skills that we did work with earlier in this cohort come into play in a group setting. So often we're there in the group and we're not the leader. And stuff's happening that we're not feeling is really productive, or in some way things are unclear. So what can we do to make a meeting better when we're a participant is that we can make requests. So we might be able to say, I'm noticing that I'm not exactly sure how we're making this decision. I'm wondering, if we could get clear on that. We can ask for clarity as a participant. I'm noticing that Joe has said the same thing a few times. I'm not sure we've really understood him yet. Could I try to say back what I think Joe's saying to see if I'm understanding him? We can participate in that way as members of a meeting. That can bring more clarity to the meeting without even being in a leadership role.
Now, I keep thinking of that slide about supporting what really is working for vendors and market operators, and the functioning with transparency, consistency, discretion, so ways of, and so even could come in with what you understand rules or guidelines to be, like, are there bylaws that impact the discussion? So bringing information in is another, part that you could play.
Yes. Yes. So it's easy to get disenfranchised in a meeting and maybe kind of just sit back and just go, oh man. So what could be so much more valuable is to sit forward and go, how can I help this meeting be more productive? And it might be bringing information into the picture. It might be asking the right questions about, so it seems like we're swirling around a little bit, and I'm wondering if what we're really talking about is this, or, just like bringing questions, bringing engagement. So as we notice ourselves disengaging, there's that choice moment where we say to ourselves, do I want to step in more and see if I can help this meeting be more productive, and what would that look like? Or am I just really done with this group and I don't really, I'm too tired. It's always choice, but if we're going to keep attending certain meetings and they're not feeling productive, we might as well engage and see if we can use some of these outlines, even if we're not the leader, some of these things to bring the right questions to the group. Yeah, so I'm interested, love to hear questions and comments about what I'm sharing, and also just love to hear things that you've noticed in groups that you've been part of.
I see
I
a
want
quick, go ahead, Jill. You go first.
I think it is so important for the leader of a meeting, whoever's facilitating that meeting, to actually do a good job, because I have been in meetings where the facilitator is just going off on tangents and not holding the meeting together, and you just sit there and you're like just itching to yell something, and nothing good is happening. So yes, the facilitator is super important.
Yes, yes. Yes, and all of our time is so valuable. We're all pulled in a zillion directions. To spend time sitting in a meeting that isn't being held well by the facilitator, doesn't seem productive, is so frustrating.
Yeah, and Miranda had said that loved the idea of circling back to voices who might not be heard as a form of leadership or productive conversation. And there's many ways to do that. And then Gretchen said, is it okay, she had a question, to set boundaries if you once were in leadership and have stepped back, and the new leadership is trying to pull you into a role that isn't yours anymore? So how do you work with that?
So I just want to get some clarification to make sure I'm understanding well. Is it that in a meeting context, you might not any longer be a leader, and yet in that context, people are looking to you to lead? Just want to get my understanding, Miranda.
So
Gretchen.
I'll clarify it. If the situation I was thinking about is lately, I've stepped back from being a board member and been really clear that I just want to be a vendor for a while, and I just want to sell things and deal with some personal stuff. But I felt like I was kind of becoming on the outside anyways, so I just wanted to just step back for a while. But the people that are in the leadership roles are all of a sudden I used to be very involved with if there were grants or if there was fundraising or anything like that, I used to be involved with that. Communication with community members, and all of a sudden that's not my role anymore. And part of it is I've stepped back, but part of it is other people have taken it on. But all of a sudden they are saying, hey, what do you think about this grant that we're writing? We're looking for some things that the market might need. And I finally had to say to them, I'm not comfortable being involved in the tail end of a grant process, because that's not really my place anymore. If you had wanted my input, I would have appreciated being kind of front loaded into the situation, but it's really not my place. So I really don't feel like you should have come to me and asked my opinion. I don't feel like I'm being really clear in what I'm saying, but just that boundaries of just if you've stepped back, not being drawn in to do what you used to do, and just saying, okay, that's on your shoulders now. That's your responsibility. You know, don't
Yeah.
come to me last minute and expect me to fix the problem, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so your role has changed, and there are folks who sometimes are wanting to pull you in to things that might have been a part of your role in the past, but you're no longer in that role. And so I think your question maybe is, it sounded like your question is that okay? Is it okay to say no? And so what I'm thinking is that it is so helpful to tell people clearly where your lines are drawn, because that helps them too. If if they need some support and they're coming to you and you let them know clearly that that's not part of your role anymore, now they're freed up to go look for that support elsewhere. As long as that's at all unclear, and it seems like maybe you would help, or sometimes you do help, then in that unclarity, they'll keep coming to you. So you actually do them a favor by giving them the real clarity, because then they are freed to go find the support a different way. I'm wondering how that is to hear, Gretchen.
That makes sense. And I guess part of that was setting the boundaries of saying, you know, don't come to me last minute. I think I guess I was looking for reassurance that it's okay to be honest with what I'm seeing and say, you know, I'm not comfortable with the position you're putting me in, and setting that boundary and trying to model that communication of, you know, I don't feel like that's my place anymore. And like you said, giving them permission. I guess what I was also trying to say is, you know, to them, is that, you know, I'm willing to help, but these are the parameters that I'm
Yeah.
comfortable with, you know,
Yeah.
and being able to just set those boundaries and those parameters of, if you need my help, don't come last minute. And these are the things that I enjoy helping with. Just setting boundaries. Setting boundaries is really hard, like in whatever role we're in market. And sometimes people don't like it when we set boundaries.
Yeah, they might be disappointed. And you do them a great service when you're really clear about what you are interested in doing and what you're not interested in doing, and what the parameters are, under what circumstances you would help and under what circumstances this wouldn't be something you'll do. So that, I think, really, Gretchen, what you're pointing to is real clear communication about what you will do, what you won't do. And that goes a long way to preventing misunderstanding. And so yes, I guess if assurance is what you're looking for, I would like to assure you that clear boundaries are very helpful.
And Miranda has her hand up.
Miranda, yeah.
So one thing that I think is important to acknowledge at this point is sometimes we can use like rules and expectations and needs, and it can be a really, really supportive environment. And sometimes we create so many structures that people enforce rules as a form of a power dynamic, and then voices aren't heard. So like, as you are creating these systems within your organization, it's important, like, are we creating rules and regulations that allow everyone to speak, or are we creating rules and regulations that make not everybody feel safe to share? Is kind of just like a thought I'm mulling around as we come out, because I'm talking to my board member on the same thing. And one thing that I feel confident in our organization is even though there is technically a power dynamic, everybody's confident in sharing their voices and their opinions. And would that dynamic change if we started to create a system where we really controlled how people express themselves?
Yes, so it's so important, I think, that the guidelines and rules and processes for any group reflect that culture and are in harmony with the values of that organization. And so some organizations are highly collaborative or highly diverse in ways that there will be really outlying opinions and views that might be challenging to work with, and yet you may want to make sure that those diverse ways of communicating are welcomed and space made for them. Yeah, yeah, I love that line of thinking. I love that you're thinking that way. And I think that a leader might want to the highest degree possible, not be having to do a whole lot of leading in a situation where a group has full investment in co-creating the guidelines and helping calling them each other into alignment with them, and holding each other in that kind of space. Then the leader mostly just sits back and watches the healthy group do a great job. And then sometimes in the beginning, sometimes a leader has a lot more to do because those things aren't in place yet.
I want to note the time to our education team here.
Thank you.
Yeah, this has been a good conversation, and we had these two ideas of having a breakout room with a prompt around this discussion, and then the final breakout room was going to be back with your market teams. And so my suggestion, Lee and Karen, and I'm wondering what you think, is maybe we go straight to the market team breakout room, where they can, if they feel moved to, they can totally discuss this topic of like, what are the decision-making processes and group meeting processes that we have at our market, and how could they be strengthened based on what we've discussed today. There's that prompt. There's also just the kind of the final prompts we have for you all in this, as we're wrapping up this conflicts training, around just like, where are you still feeling stuck, and what are you taking from this training series, and what support do you need in order to bring this learning into action at your markets. So Karen and Lee, what do you all think? Should we go to that final breakout room and give them a handful of prompts that they can workshop with their team?
Sure. I know that one of the things that came up a lot in the feedback was how much value you get from talking with each other. And so, a good spacious amount of time for a final breakout might be really, really good. It would be really interesting to me, to hear at the end, like when we come back after those breakouts, to hear some of the supports that you're longing for in the harvest. So if you could specifically make note of those, what do you think? Are you needing more training? Do you need somebody to come in from, and doing mediation, or, like what? So a list of those things would be really helpful to hear when you come back out of these breakouts.
And I guess I'm
Yes.
just wondering about clarifying if people are interested in meeting in small group with their team member, or is there a desire to continue hearing from between the larger group? I guess just wanting to, because we could address it in terms of what your needs are.
Miranda says other organizations as well.
We could also do something off script, which is we could put you in breakout rooms with another market pair. So it would just be 2 people from one market, 2 people from another market. So you could maybe get the small group experience, but also hear how another market does things. Maybe, are we trying to vote on what folks want to do? Going into breakout rooms or not?
I think let's do that. Let's bring them into force. 2 market pairs.
Okay. I am going to need a minute to do that. Silly me and my
Sending our-
suggestions. So talk amongst yourselves.
And Gretchen, we're tracking you, and both Ben don't have your market teammates here. So we're monitoring that. And Carrie, you raised your hand. Go ahead.
I don't have my market teammate either. So
Flying solo. Well, I think that speaks to the value of having us go into groups of 4. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
We can steal you, Carrie. I just find it so interesting with the group facilitation stuff. Like I see at market meetings just many people without any background or training in this, including myself, right? Like that. I mean, show of hands, who has like taken a training or a class on group facilitation? My hands down. Cool. Oh, cool.
I have a master's degree in education. Does that count? I've been a teacher for 7 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's significant.
It's amazing how many people, just end up in that role without it. And yeah, like there's without intention or planning going into those meetings, they can really go in weird directions or just not be very productive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Andrew, you raised your hand. Oh, you were just saying you've taken a lesson. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much going on, and anytime we gather as groups, there's just things going on in our nervous systems in terms of how are we in group gatherings, and not everybody's the same. Some people have a real ease with finding a way to get their voice in, and some people become completely quiet and have to be sort of drawn out in order to enter their voice. And there's just so much going on in group process. Some people have found groups terrifying their whole life, so they come to a meeting anxious already. And other people are like, woohoo, I'm going to be with other people, and they can't wait to get in a room with a bunch of people. So there's all these dynamics going on every time we gather as a group.
And there's somebody who talked about The Art of Gathering is a great book. Also to take this consciousness and bring it to any kind of small group conversation that you're having. So if you're meeting with 2 vendors, or if you're, so applying some of those same strategies that you talked about, Leah, and practicing those. And I'm wondering if even just people want to put in the chat, if there was one thing you could get more clarity around, or if there's one thing, a skill that came up, or a kind of support that you'd like, I have a question still about this, or I have a want for this from my group members, or anything. Please feel free to throw it in the chat, or raise your hand before we go into groups.
All right, Andrew, are you ready to fire it off?
Yeah, here we go, folks. Aaron and Leah, if one of you could go into room 7, that would be good. That's a collection of 3 people whose market partners are not here.
Sure, I'd be happy to go there.
I'm going to go into room 1.
Okay.
How much time we doing, Andrew? 10 minutes?
I mean, I think we're off the map. 10 minutes sounds good to me.
10, 50, yeah, okay.
We had scheduled until 10:35, and but it could go longer.
10
So
minutes takes us to 10:38, probably
Oh.
10:40 by the time we get
Okay.
everybody back.
I
So,
think we could close, unless we want to have people share back in the group and do a closing. Depends.
yeah. I'm gonna jump into room 7 because they are not like the others.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I know Leo was going there too, and I need to run to the restroom, and then I'll jump into the room that doesn't have anybody.
Okay.
Okay, I mean, have one of the team members. Okay.
Julia, do you see an invitation to join the breakout room?
Hmm.
Hi, everybody. Looks like we're back.
I don't know if that was intentional.
I think it
I know
was.
we were, the group I was in was right in the midst of a really interesting discussion and feedback.
Mm. Well, we can go back into it. We've got 20 minutes left, and we wanted some intentional time, right? To like for that remaining to like what else do we want to dive into? Yeah, I think borrowing from Leah's outline, I think there we can have a moment for some closing for today, and then but also acknowledge like there's 20 minutes left, soon to be 15, and a handful of us are also available to stay on later if there's just more discussion that wants to be had. Yeah, for the I guess I'm looking at our outline. Just for a closing for today, so we've talked about group processes, we explored roles and power dynamics, and it seems like all of you are on different journeys with your markets for just how to improve the structures and how to improve the flow of your markets to to prevent conflicts in the future. Really encourage you all, the more that we in Maine have been discussing mediation as a path forward, the more I've seen farmers and markets using it. And it's just amazing to have a neutral party in the room and maybe even using it if you foresee issues becoming toxic quickly or being really highly problematic, like mediation, bring in mediation before it gets to that point would be wise. It's kind of a tangential thought. But we are here to stick around till the 11 o'clock hour and a little bit beyond. And I guess if folks want to just like add one word or phrase in the chat that expresses an appreciation that they're taking away from today, something they learned or something they heard, that can be how we formally close today. And then we can have you all are welcome to leave or welcome to stay, and we can talk about things that are still ruminating for us.
Yeah, I just before that goes, oh, I guess people are going with that.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
Go ahead. What did you want to say, Karen?
Oh, just beyond mediation that, how will they stay in connection with each other, to help give each other input on how they manage certain situations, what structures do they have? I think there was something interesting in the group that was talking about when you're in between two different roles and how you get support from the board or how you might manage something so you can weather a difficult transition, because just even in your role to how do you just get through things that can be wearing on you, because it will take time. So just other ideas of getting shared support.
And I'd like to mention facilitation support as another option that we can offer, and coaching. And to note that transition times almost always have the potential for conflict. Even if everybody agreed we're making this transition, we didn't all at the time we make the transition know all the ways it would impact us. And so there's all the confusions that go with any kind of transition. So sometimes that's an excellent time for some facilitation support.
Jamie, appreciation for all of the people who care so much about making our markets and food system vibrant. So that's appreciation for everybody in this room. Thanks, Jamie.
Oh, nice.
So moving into the final kind of the after party, the encore. You all are welcome to walk out. You know, usually the encore is the best part. You all are welcome to, you're dismissed for the day if you've got places to go or just ready to depart from staring at your screen for a couple hours. Carrie's waving goodbye. Bye, Carrie.
Mm.
And we have another, February 28th is our last one. And yeah, happy Valentine's Day, everybody, too.
Mm.
And yeah, Karen, I don't know, do you and your group want to go back into a breakout? I could throw you into it right now. So I'll pause and let you and the other folks respond.
I don't know where the group is sitting with that, if they wanted to continue.
It's up to Dorset. I know that we've connected a lot offline because I think we're a similarly sized market, so we get put together a lot. So we've been kind of opening that line of communication,
Nice.
trying to support
Okay.
each other, which I appreciate you building that connection for us.
Mhm.
That's the idea. Good. Well, if that's not happening, yeah, what's on people's minds? What's sticking? Where are you stuck, or what's sticking with you that you want to talk about? And I'm gonna pause.